The crisp October air held the first true bite of autumn, a welcome reprieve from the lingering Texas heat. Alex Davison knelt on his lawn, the damp grass cool against his knees, and held a small wooden stake steady. His friend, Jim, a man whose life revolved around the unwavering certainty of property lines and elevation grades, brought a small mallet down with a decisive thump. The stake sank into the soil, a tiny flag of fluorescent orange fluttering from its top. "That's the southeast corner," Jim said, straightening up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "Dead on. The plat map doesn't lie." Alex smiled, a genuine expression of relief. "Thanks again for this, Jim. I know a Saturday is a lot to ask." "Are you kidding? A chance to prove an HOA president wrong with verifiable geodesic data? This is a surveyor's dream." Jim gestured with the mallet toward the far end of the yard. "Let's get the southwest marker in, and you'll have a perfect line for the fence company." They were halfway across the lawn when a voice, polite yet as unyielding as concrete, cut through the quiet morning. "Good morning, gentlemen." Alex turned. There, standing on the edge of his property, was Brenda Wallace. She was in her mid-50s, dressed in an immaculately pressed LL Bean ensemble, a leather-bound clipboard held at the ready in one hand. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a helmet of impenetrable perfection, and her sunglasses, even in the morning's gentle light, were large and dark, obscuring her eyes, but not the aura of absolute authority she projected. She was the president of the Sweetwater Creek Homeowners Association, a position she wielded not as a service, but as a sovereignty. "Brenda," Alex said, his voice even, "Nice morning." She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a practiced, political smile, one that conveyed civility while promising none. "It is. I couldn't help but notice the survey markers. I'm afraid I have to ask you to cease any further activity." Alex's own smile tightened. "We're just marking out the property line for a fence application I'm submitting. It's all on my lot." Brenda took a deliberate step forward, her sensible walking shoes making no sound on the manicured grass. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on her clipboard. "As you know, Alex, your property abuts the community's designated common area greenbelt, and, as per the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, specifically Article 8, all homeowners have a right to the preservation of community aesthetics, which includes the view corridors." Jim, ever the professional, stepped in. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've just run the survey from the official plat map filed with Travis County. This stake, and the line it marks, is well within Mr. Davison's private lot. There is no recorded easement for a view corridor on this parcel." Brenda's smile remained fixed, a mask of serene condescension. She directed her attention solely to Alex, dismissing Jim as if he were a talking garden gnome. "The board interprets that clause to protect the open, park-like feel of the community. A 6-foot privacy fence here would obstruct that view. It's a non-starter. You'll need to remove the stakes immediately." The humiliation was subtle but sharp. It wasn't a shout. It was a public correction delivered with the calm certainty of a teacher reprimanding a child. A neighbor across the street, retrieving his newspaper, slowed his walk. His curiosity piqued. Alex took a slow breath, forcing the frustration down. He had anticipated this, but the sheer, unblinking audacity of it still stung. "Brenda, I've reviewed the CC&Rs myself. I'm well within my rights to build a fence on my own property, pending ACC approval of the materials. The markers are staying. I'll be submitting my application on Monday." For the first time, a flicker of something other than placid control crossed Brenda's face. It was a brief, cold flash of irritation. She adjusted her sunglasses. "I would strongly advise against it." Alex, for the sake of community harmony, it would be a shame to start a formal process over something so avoidable. She turned and walked away, her posture ramrod straight, the clipboard held like a scepter. The implied threat hung in the air, heavier than the morning humidity. Jim let out a low whistle. Wow. She doesn't even blink. You've got a fight on your hands. Alex watched her retreat, a knot tightening in his stomach. He wasn't a confrontational man. He was a software architect, a creature of logic and defined parameters. But this wasn't about aesthetics or community harmony. He looked back at his house, at the large window of the playroom where his 4-year-old daughter, Lily, was likely arranging her stuffed animals into a complex society he could never quite understand. This was about her. I know, Alex said, his voice low and determined. But it's a fight I have to win. That evening, the scent of grilled chicken and Sarah's famous roasted potatoes filled their small, tidy home. Lily, having successfully negotiated for an extra 5 minutes of screen time, was quietly watching a cartoon on the tablet, her small face illuminated by the glow. Sarah, however, was watching Alex. She traced the rim of her wine glass, her brow furrowed with the worry she'd been holding in all day. So she just came over and told you to stop? Sarah asked, her voice hushed. Just like that. Alex nodded, pushing a piece of potato around his plate. She called it a view corridor, claimed it was common area. Jim told her flat out that it's our land, but she didn't even acknowledge him. It was like he wasn't there. That's Brenda. Sarah sighed. She lives in her own reality, governed by her own rules. Alex, are you sure about this? You know her reputation. The Millers tried to install a basketball hoop, and she made their lives miserable for 6 months. Fines. Violation notices for the grass being a 1/4 inch too high. They finally gave up and took it down. The atmosphere in Sweetwater Creek was one of quiet compliance. Brenda had cultivated it for years. She knew the governing documents better than the HOA's own lawyer, and she wielded them with surgical precision against anyone who dared to deviate from her vision of suburban perfection. People paid their dues, mowed their lawns on the approved schedule, and kept their heads down. To provoke Brenda was to invite a slow, bureaucratic siege. This is different, Alex insisted, his gaze drifting toward Lily. The Millers' basketball hoop was an aesthetic choice. This is about safety. Lily had been diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome, a rare and unpredictable condition. For her, a simple bee sting wasn't just a painful nuisance. It was a potentially life-threatening emergency. Their backyard, which bordered the unmanaged greenbelt, was a minefield of clover patches and flowering weeds that attracted bees in droves. They couldn't let her play outside unsupervised for a single minute. A privacy fence wasn't a luxury. It was their only path to giving their daughter a normal, carefree space to be a child. I know it is, Sarah said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. I worry about the stress. For you. For us. She's vindictive. She's a bully, Alex countered. And the only way to deal with a bully is to stand up to them. With facts. With documents. I have the survey. I have the deed. She has an interpretation. I'll submit the application to the Architectural Control Committee on Monday. Let her make her move. It has to go through the proper channels. He projected a confidence he didn't entirely feel. He'd seen the fear in his neighbor's eyes. He'd seen it in Mr. Henderson's, the elderly widower who lived 2 doors down. Last month, Brenda had begun fining him $50 a week for a cheerful, 2-foot-tall garden gnome that stood beside his prize-winning roses. The gnome, Brenda had declared in a formal notice, was a non-conforming lawn ornament that violated the community's aesthetic standards. Mr. Henderson, a man who had survived 2 tours in Vietnam, was too tired and too intimidated to fight. He just quietly paid the fines. Alex squeezed Sarah's hand. "I'm not going to let her do that to us. I'm going to follow the process. By the book. The facts are on our side." Sarah nodded, though the worry didn't leave her eyes. "Okay, but please, Alex, be careful." He knew what she meant. This wasn't just about rules and regulations. With Brenda, it was always personal, and he was about to walk directly into her crosshairs. On Monday, October 5th, Alex drove to the offices of Pinnacle Community Management, the third-party company that handled the HOA's administrative tasks. He handed over a meticulously prepared ACC application packet. It contained the fence design from a reputable local company, a list of materials: cedar, 6-foot pickets, stained a board-approved color, and a copy of Jim's certified property survey, with the proposed fence line clearly marked inside his lot boundaries. The woman at the front desk accepted it with a bored expression and time-stamped his receipt. The clock had started. For a week, there was silence. Alex allowed himself a flicker of hope. Maybe the sheer professionalism of the application, the undeniable evidence of the survey, would be enough. Maybe the ACC, which consisted of 3 other homeowners, would simply approve it based on its merits. That hope was extinguished on the afternoon of October 12th by an email. It was from Brenda, with the entire board of directors and Clark Dempsey, their Pinnacle property manager, copied. Subject: your application, Lot 114, Sweetwater Creek. Dear Mr. Davison, this email serves as a courtesy notice regarding your recent ACC application for a perimeter fence. While the application has been received, I feel it is my duty, as board president, to advise you to reconsider your proposed placement. As we discussed, the board has a long-standing commitment to preserving the aesthetic integrity and open green spaces that define our community. The construction of a 6-foot solid fence, directly abutting the common area, would fundamentally alter the character of the neighborhood for dozens of your fellow residents. Please refer to CC&R for 8.4.2, which grants the board authority over the preservation of community aesthetics. We believe your proposed structure falls afoul of this critical provision. I would urge you to withdraw your current application and consider a more community-minded alternative, perhaps a lower, more transparent fence style. To proceed as planned would likely result in a formal denial from the ACC and could initiate an unfortunate and entirely preventable compliance process. Regards, Brenda Wallace, President, Sweetwater Creek HOA. The language was so perfectly calibrated, polite, reasonable, and utterly menacing. It was a warning shot, delivered on official letterhead. He hadn't even received a formal decision from the ACC. Yet the board president was already threatening him with a compliance process. He spent the next week in a state of anxious limbo, checking his mail every day. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from him at the dinner table. Then, on Saturday, October 19th, it came, not in a standard envelope, but in the stiff, green and white sleeve of a certified mail letter. He had to sign for it at the door, the mail carrier's electronic stylus recording his reluctant acceptance. Inside, printed on thick Pinnacle Management letterhead, was the official response. Formal violation notice. Date: October 18th, 2023. Property: 128. Quiet Brook, Lane Lot 114. Owner: Alex Davison. Certified mail: U7018 1830 001 8462 9371. Dear Mr. Davison, this letter is to formally notify you that you are in violation of the Sweetwater Creek Homeowners Association's covenants. conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs. Violation CC&R. FIARWAR 8.4.2. Preservation of Community Aesthetics. Your submitted application and on-site survey markers indicate a clear intent to construct a non-compliant structure, a 6-foot privacy fence that obstructs a community view corridor and damages the aesthetic character of the common area. The Architectural Control Committee has officially denied your application on these grounds. Required action. You are required to immediately remove all survey markers from the property line adjacent to the common area and cease all plans for the construction of the proposed fence. Consequences of non-compliance. Failure to comply will result in further enforcement action as outlined in the association's bylaws. You have the right to appeal this decision by requesting a hearing before the Board of Directors within 10 business days. If the violation is not cured, fines may be levied against your property, starting at $100 per day. Sincerely, Clark Dempsey, on behalf of the Sweetwater Creek Board of Directors. Alex stared at the paper, his hands trembling slightly. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. It wasn't a courtesy notice. It was a formal declaration of war, complete with a tracking number and the threat of financial penalties. The fight was real, and he had just been served. The first casualty of any bureaucratic war is optimism. Alex felt his drain away during a 10-minute phone call with Clark Dempsey at Pinnacle Management. "Mr. Dempsey," Alex began, his voice a study in forced calm as he paced his home office, the violation notice lying on his desk like an indictment. "I'm calling about the notice I received for Lot 114. There seems to be a significant misunderstanding. The fence is entirely on my private property. The denial cites CC&R 8.4.2, but that clause doesn't mention view corridors or easements at all." Clark's voice on the other end was smooth, practiced, and utterly impassive. It was the voice of a man who had recited the same script 1,000 times. "Mr. Davison, I understand your position. However, Pinnacle Management acts solely as the agent for your board of directors. The ACC, as appointed by the board, has interpreted that clause as applicable in this situation. My role is simply to execute their decisions and handle the associated correspondence." "But the decision is based on a false premise," Alex argued, his frustration mounting. "There is no view corridor. It doesn't exist on any legal document. I provided a certified survey." "The board has reviewed your documentation," Clark said, a hint of weariness in his tone. "Their position is that the community's aesthetic standards, as protected by the governing documents, take precedence. If you disagree with the ACC's decision, your next step, as outlined in the notice, is to request a formal hearing." "So you're telling me that you, as the professional management company, won't step in even when the board is misapplying the CC&Rs and inventing rules that aren't in the legal framework?" A sigh whispered through the phone line. "Mr. Davison, my contract is with the HOA, which is represented by the board. I take my direction from them. The system is designed for homeowners to appeal decisions directly to the board at a hearing. That is the proper channel." The call ended moments later. Alex hung up, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. Clark wasn't an ally. He wasn't even a neutral arbiter. He was a functionary, a cog in a machine designed to protect the board's authority, not to ensure fairness. Alex realized with cold clarity that the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as intended to stonewall, to frustrate, and to wear him down until he, like the Millers with their basketball hoop, simply gave up. He wouldn't. His next call was to Jim. He explained the situation, the denial, the phantom view corridor, the unhelpful management company. Jim listened patiently before letting out a dry chuckle. Welcome to the wonderful world of HOA governance. My friend, they're counting on you getting tired and walking away. Don't. So what's my next move? A lawyer? Not yet. That's the nuclear option. And it's expensive. You're still in the evidence-gathering phase. You have my survey, which is good. But Brenda's claiming the board's interpretation overrides it. You need something more fundamental, something she can't argue with. You need the original subdivision plat map from the county recorder's office. How is that different from your survey? Alex asked. My survey is an expert rendering of what's on the plat map, but the map itself is the foundational legal document. It's what created these lots in the first place. When a judge or a lawyer looks at a property dispute, they don't start with the CC&Rs. They start with the plat map and the deed. Get a certified copy. It's the one thing that matters in court. If there's no easement recorded on that map, there is no easement. Period. A board resolution can't just create one on your private property after the fact. Jim's advice was a beacon of logic in a sea of bureaucratic fog. Okay. County Recorder's Office. Got it. One more thing. Jim added, you have a right to see the HOA's records. Under Texas Property Code, you can request copies of meeting minutes. Ask for the last 2 years of all board meeting minutes, including executive sessions, and all ACC meeting minutes and decisions. See how they've handled other fence applications. If you find she approved a similar fence for one of her friends, you've got her on selective enforcement. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. Armed with a new strategy, Alex drafted a formal records request and emailed it to Clark Dempsey, citing the relevant sections of the Texas Property Code. He also requested the hearing, officially appealing the ACC's decision. The response came 2 days later. His hearing was scheduled for the next open board meeting on the evening of November 2nd. He had less than 2 weeks. A thick manila envelope arrived from Pinnacle a few days after that, containing the requested meeting minutes. Alex spread the stapled packets across his dining room table. It was hundreds of pages of tedious, dry proceedings. But as he read, a pattern emerged. Brenda's voice dominated every meeting, her motions always passing unanimously. Then he found what he was looking for and what he wasn't. Under the section for ACC decisions, several entries from the past year were completely blacked out with a thick marker. Entire paragraphs were redacted, leaving behind frustrating blocks of impenetrable ink. The same was true for sections under financials and, most tellingly, the minutes from 2 executive sessions closed-door meetings for the board only. What were they hiding? Why were architectural decisions being discussed in secret? The redactions weren't just an annoyance. They were a clue, a big, black, inky clue that this was about more than just his fence. On October 26th, Alex took a half-day off work and drove downtown to the Travis County Recorder's office. The building was a quiet, solemn temple of bureaucracy, filled with the scent of old paper and the low hum of fluorescent lights. After a short wait, a clerk directed him to a public terminal where he keyed in his property address. Minutes later, he was looking at the digital image of the Sweetwater Creek, Phase 2 subdivision plat map, recorded in 2005. He zoomed in on his parcel, Lot 114. The lines were clean, crisp, and unambiguous. His property extended a full 50 feet back from his house before meeting the thick, dark line that designated the common area Greenbelt. He scanned every inch of his lot on the map, looking for the dashed lines or fine print that would indicate an easement. There was nothing. No view corridor, no public access, no restrictions of any kind. It was, as Jim had predicted, his land, free and clear. He paid the fee to have a large, high-resolution copy printed and officially certified with a raised gold seal. Holding the rolled-up document felt like holding a shield. Then, a new thought sparked, an idea born of pure, strategic curiosity. He sat back down at the terminal and typed in another address: Brenda Wallace's. Her property. Lot 72 was on the other side of the neighborhood, backing up to a different section of the Greenbelt. Her plat map looked much the same as his. But then, he toggled over to the county's geographic information system, the GIS viewer, which overlaid the plat map with recent, high-resolution satellite imagery. And there it was. Brenda's house had a large, handsome wooden deck extending from the back. But when he looked closely, he could see the faint outline of where the original, smaller concrete patio had been. The deck was a clear addition, and it extended a good 12 feet further out from the house than the original structure. On the satellite photo, it was obvious that the last 4 feet of the deck, the part with the built-in benches and planters, extended past the home's official building line. A clear violation of the setback requirements detailed in the very CC&Rs she quoted like scripture. His heart began to beat a little faster. An unapproved structural addition was a major violation, far more significant than a garden gnome. Had she gotten ACC approval for it? He scrolled back through the unredacted meeting minutes he had. He searched for her address, for any mention of an application for Lot 72. Nothing. No record of an application. No record of an approval. He leaned back in his chair, a slow, cold wave of clarity washing over him. This wasn't about rules. It was never about the view corridor or community aesthetics. This was about power. Brenda enforced the rules she chose to enforce, against the people she chose to target, while flagrantly ignoring them herself. And he realized something else. This personal. It had to be. The ferocity of her opposition. The invention of a non-existent rule. It was too specific, too targeted. But why he'd barely spoken 10 words to the woman before the fence issue? He didn't have that answer yet, but he had the plat map. He had the satellite photo of her illegal deck, and he had the redacted minutes. He had the truth. Now, he just needed to find the right way to use it. Alex's strategy was direct. He scanned the certified plat map and the annotated satellite image of Brenda's deck into high-resolution PDFs. He attached them to an email addressed to Clark Dempsey and the full board of directors. His message was polite, professional, and surgically precise. Subject: evidence for hearing. Lot 114, November 2nd. Dear Mr. Dempsey and members of the board, in preparation for my hearing on November 2nd, please find the attached documents for your review. 1. Certified Plat Map, Sweetwater Creek. Phase 2. As you can see, this official document from the Travis County Recorder's Office confirms there is no view corridor easement or any other restriction recorded on my property. Lot 114. 2. ACC precedent and potential selective enforcement. My review of the meeting minutes has been hampered by significant redactions. I formally request unredacted copies of all ACC decisions from the past 24 months to ensure that the denial of my application is consistent with past rulings and does not represent selective enforcement. Given the clear evidence of the plat map, I trust we can resolve this matter and approve my application without the need for a formal hearing. To do otherwise would suggest my application is being judged by a different standard than the one written in our governing documents. Regards, Alex Davison. He didn't include the image of Brenda's deck. That was his trump card, the one he would hold in reserve for the hearing itself. He hit send and waited. The reply came less than an hour later. It was from Brenda, and she had hit reply all. Subject: re-evidence for hearing. Lot 114, November 2nd. Mr. Davison, The board is in receipt of your email. Your continued insistence on misinterpreting the governing documents is regrettable. As has been stated, the official plat map can be superseded by board resolutions and long-standing community standards established to protect the welfare of all residents. The board's interpretation of 48.4.2 is resolute and consistent. Your request for unredacted minutes is denied, as those redactions protect confidential homeowner information and legal discussions. As is the board's right, your continued baseless accusations of selective enforcement are inflammatory and constitute harassment of volunteer board members. The hearing for your appeal is confirmed for November 2nd at 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse. Please be prepared to present your case at that time. You will be allotted 5 minutes. Brenda Wallace, President. Sweetwater Creek, HOA. It was a masterstroke of bureaucratic intimidation. In one email, she had dismissed his irrefutable evidence, denied his legal right to information, and accused him of harassment. The walls were closing in. She wasn't just trying to win, she was trying to crush him. The night before the hearing, Alex stood in his garage, a large foam board propped up on his workbench. He had printed the certified plat map as a giant, 3-foot-wide poster. Beside it, he had another poster with a blown-up satellite image of Brenda's house, a bright red circle drawn around the illegal deck extension. He had copies of the CC&Rs, the redacted minutes, and a printout of an email chain he'd obtained from a sympathetic neighbor, showing Brenda approving a friend's nearly identical fence last year after a discussion in one of the redacted executive sessions. He stood there, a laser pointer in his hand, rehearsing his 5-minute presentation over and over. He practiced staying calm, speaking clearly, and letting the evidence speak for itself. Sarah stood in the doorway, a mug of tea in her hands. "You look like a general planning a battle," she said softly. "That's what it is," Alex replied, not taking his eyes off the posters. "She's left me no choice." He knew he had the facts. He knew he had the truth. But as he prepared to walk into that room, to face a hostile board and a room full of neighbors too afraid to speak up, he also knew that in the court of Brenda Wallace, the truth was only as powerful as the person brave enough to speak it, and he had only 5 minutes to make it count. The Sweetwater Creek Community Clubhouse smelled of stale coffee and industrial-grade carpet cleaner. White folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, facing a long dais where the 5 members of the board of directors sat. Brenda was in the center, flanked by her allies. To her right sat Clark Dempsey, the Pinnacle manager, looking bored, and to her left, a balding, weary-looking man who Alex recognized as the HOA's attorney. The room was half full with about 30 residents, their expressions ranging from curious to anxious. Mr. Henderson was near the back, looking smaller and more frail than usual. On the podium, facing the audience, a small digital clock displayed the numbers 500 in bright red. As Alex made his way to the front of the room to set up his presentation materials, Brenda intercepted him in the narrow aisle. She leaned in close, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper that no one else could hear. "Alex," she began, her tone surprisingly placid, "this has gone on long enough. It's causing unnecessary division. Let's end it now. Stand up, withdraw your appeal, and I will personally see to it that a modified application for a 4-foot black aluminum fence is approved for you by the end of the week. No fines, no record. We can put this all behind us." Alex stared at her. It was a deal, an off-the-books offer to make his problem go away. A 4-foot fence wouldn't keep the bees out, wouldn't give Lily the complete safety she needed. But it was something. It was an easy out. And if he took it, her own violations, her selective enforcement, would remain her secret. Mr. Henderson's gnome fines would continue. The rot at the core of their HOA would remain. He glanced over at Mr. Henderson, who was nervously twisting a handkerchief in his hands. "What about the view corridor?" Alex asked, his voice quiet. Brenda waved a dismissive hand. "A technicality we can overlook for a more appropriate fence style. What do you say?" He was being offered a personal victory at the cost of communal justice. He could take the win and walk away, leaving everyone else to fend for themselves. Or he could burn it all down, for everyone's sake, knowing it would be a brutal, public fight. He looked at Brenda's confident, smiling face, then back at Mr. Henderson's worried one. The choice was clear. "No, thank you, Brenda," he said firmly. "I think I'll take my 5 minutes." Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. "You'll regret that," she hissed, before turning and taking her seat at the dais. The meeting began with monotonous procedural matters. Finally, Brenda announced, "The next item on the agenda is the appeal by Mr. Alex Davison of Lot 114 regarding the denial of his ACC application. Mr. Davison, you have 5 minutes to present your case. Your time begins now." She nodded to Clark, who pressed a button. The clock on the podium started its inexorable countdown. 4:59, 4:58, 4:57. Alex took a deep breath and walked to the podium. He placed his posters on an easel facing the audience and the board. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified slightly by the microphone. "My name is Alex Davison. I'm here tonight to appeal the denial of my application for a privacy fence. The denial was based on a single clause in our CC&Rs, Section 8.4.2, which the board claims gives it the authority to protect a community view corridor on my private property." He held up a copy of the CC&Rs, with the relevant section highlighted. "I'd like to read Section 8.4.2 aloud for everyone. It states, and I quote, 'Preservation of community aesthetics. All structures shall be maintained in a state of good repair and condition to preserve the aesthetic value and harmony of the community.' That's it. It says nothing about views, nothing about greenbelts, and it certainly does not grant the board the power to invent an easement on a homeowner's private land." He paused, letting the words sink in. 4:10. The board claims its interpretation of this clause is what matters. But in property law, interpretations don't matter when confronted with recorded facts. He turned and unveiled the first poster, the huge, certified plat map. He picked up the laser pointer, and a small red dot appeared on the map. "This is the official plat map for our neighborhood, certified by Travis County. Here is my property, Lot 114. The red dot traced the unambiguous lines. As you can clearly see, there is no easement, none. To claim one exists is not an interpretation. It is a fabrication." A murmur went through the crowd. Brenda sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly on the table. President Wallace claimed in an email that plat maps can be superseded by board resolutions. So, I would like to formally ask the board right now, what is the specific resolution number? And on what date was it passed? That created an easement on my property? I'm happy to wait for the answer." He stopped talking. Silence descended on the room, thick and heavy. The only sound was the soft digital click of the clock. 3:15, 3:14, 3:13. The board members glanced at each other, then at their attorney, who offered a slight, uncomfortable shake of his head. Brenda stared straight ahead, her face a stone mask. They had no answer because none existed. "As I thought," Alex continued, the momentum now squarely on his side. "Now, Let's talk about selective enforcement. He swapped the plat map for his second poster, the one showing the email chain about the approved fence. This is an email from last May, where President Wallace approved a 6-foot cedar privacy fence for the Henderson family on Lot 88, which also abuts a common area. This approval was granted after a discussion in an executive session, a session whose minutes were conveniently redacted when I requested them. So, a nearly identical fence was approved for a friend of the board, while my application for a fence to protect my young daughter's health and safety was denied for violating a rule that doesn't exist. The murmurs grew louder. People were shifting in their seats, whispering to each other. This is not about community aesthetics. This is about the arbitrary and punitive application of power. It's about fining an elderly man like Mr. Henderson for a harmless garden gnome while ignoring actual significant violations. He made his final move, revealing the third poster, the satellite image of Brenda's house. The illegal deck circled in red. Speaking of violations, this is Lot 72, President Wallace's own home. This deck is a clear violation of the setback requirements outlined in our CC&Rs. There is no record of it ever being submitted to or approved by the ACC. So, I have to ask, how can a board president, who is herself in violation of the rules, be trusted to enforce them fairly upon anyone else? The room erupted. The HOA attorney was now whispering frantically into Brenda's ear. Clark Dempsey looked pale, staring at the poster as if it were a snake. Brenda stood up abruptly. "Mr. Davison, your time is—" "I have 1 minute left," Alex said, his voice ringing with authority. He turned to face his neighbors. "This has never been about my fence. It's about our rights as homeowners. It's about ensuring the people we elect to this board serve the community, not themselves. It's about demanding transparency and fair treatment for everyone, not just a select few. Approving my fence is the first step. The next is a full, independent audit of this board's financial and architectural decisions for the past 5 years." He placed the laser pointer on the podium. The clock showed he had said everything he needed to say. "My time is up," he concluded, and walked back to his seat as the buzzer sounded. The room was in chaos. Brenda, for the first time, looked utterly lost. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply sank back into her chair, her expression blank, the fight completely gone from her eyes. Another board member, a woman named Mrs. Gable, leaned toward her microphone. "I move to immediately approve the fence application for Lot 114 as submitted," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Second came a voice from the end of the table. Brenda didn't even look up. "All in favor?" Mrs. Gable asked. 4 hands went up. The motion passed. I further move to rescind any and all fines related to this matter, and to schedule an emergency executive session to discuss the serious issues of selective enforcement and breach of fiduciary duty raised here tonight. The motion was seconded and passed just as quickly. The gavel came down, and the meeting was adjourned. The spell was broken. In the immediate aftermath of the meeting's explosive conclusion, the clubhouse buzzed with a nervous energy it hadn't felt in years. The board members, minus Brenda, who had slipped out a side door, immediately convened their emergency session in a small back office. Clark Dempsey, the Pinnacle manager, was summoned inside, his face ashen, through the thin door. Alex could hear raised, urgent voices. His neighbors, who for weeks had offered only nervous smiles or avoided eye contact altogether, now approached him in a steady stream. "That was incredible, Alex," said one man, clapping him on the shoulder. "You had her dead to rights." Another woman, the one who lived next to the Millers of the failed basketball hoop, touched his arm. "Thank you," she said, her eyes welling with tears. Someone finally did it. We were all just so afraid. Mr. Henderson shuffled over, his posture straighter than Alex had ever seen it. He gripped Alex's hand with surprising strength. You didn't have to mention my gnome. Son, you put your own case at risk for me. We're neighbors, Mr. Henderson, Alex said simply. It was the right thing to do. Sarah reached him then, her arms wrapping around him in a tight embrace. You were amazing, she whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with relief and pride. You did it. He held her close, the adrenaline of the past hour finally beginning to recede, leaving a profound sense of exhaustion and vindication in its wake. He hadn't just won a fight over a fence. He had given his community its voice back. Weeks later, the sound of a nail gun echoed through the crisp November air. The fence was nearly complete, the scent of fresh-cut cedar a declaration of victory. Inside the newly enclosed yard, Lily chased a bright red ball across the grass, her laughter unburdened, free, and safe. Alex watched her from the kitchen window, a deep, quiet satisfaction settling over him. The promised audit of the HOA was underway, conducted by an outside accounting firm. Brenda Wallace had resigned from the board the day after the meeting, citing personal reasons. Her house, Lot 72, now had a large for sale sign planted in the front yard. A formal letter had arrived from the new board president, Mrs. Gable. It contained a sincere apology for the unwarranted and stressful ordeal his family had been put through, along with official confirmation that all fines and violation notices had been permanently expunged from his record. One afternoon, as Alex was admiring the fence crew's handiwork, Mr. Henderson walked over from his yard, holding a small, potted rose bush. "A thank you," the old man said, handing it to Alex, "for everything." "It wasn't necessary, but thank you, Mr. Henderson." Alex smiled. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the workers. Then, Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I was thinking about why Brenda was so dead set against you from the start. It never made sense. It was too personal, too vicious, even for her." Alex nodded. "I thought the same thing. I figured it was just a power trip." "It was more than that," Mr. Henderson said, looking over at Brenda's house. "My son used to be in commercial real estate development. About 12 years ago, there was a big bidding war for a prime piece of land over by the new tech corridor. My son's company was in the running, but so was another small firm, Wallace Development, run by Brenda's husband, Frank." A prickle of unease ran down Alex's spine. Frank Wallace had everything riding on that deal. He was over-leveraged, and he needed it to stay afloat. At the last minute, a third company, a mid-sized firm out of Dallas nobody saw coming, swooped in with an all-cash offer and blew everyone else out of the water. Frank's company went under within 6 months. They lost everything: their savings, their investments, their status. I heard it just about destroyed him. Mr. Henderson turned to look directly at Alex. "My son told me the name of that Dallas firm. It was called HOA Solutions. He said one of their lead project architects, a real rising star, was the one who put the winning proposal together." Alex felt the air leave his lungs. HOA Solutions. It was the company where he'd worked for 15 years. Right out of college, he had been that rising star. He remembered the project a massive, career-making deal. He had never met the competing bidders, had never even known their names. To him, it was just business, a transaction, a victory on a spreadsheet. He had no idea he had been the unwitting architect of Brenda's financial and social ruin over a decade ago. It was never about the view. It was never about the fence. It was about a deep, festering grudge, a decade-old wound that had never healed, her reign on the HOA board, her obsession with power and control. It was all she had left. And when he had moved into her kingdom, she had finally found a target for all those years of simmering resentment. He looked from the fence, which stood for justice and principle, to Lily, who was now safely picking a dandelion, and finally to Brenda's empty house. His victory felt different now, not less satisfying, but heavier, more complex. He had won a war without ever knowing what they were fighting about.